Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Cat B and Andy B, no relations, Inspired Connections podcast show. We are coming to you transatlantic from the UK and the US. In this podcast show, we are going to explore and discuss how inspired connections have impacted people's lives positively and share what to look out for so that you too can experience and enjoy these inspired connections in your life as well. Welcome, I'm Andy B, and I'm here today to interview my good friend, Cat B.
Hi,
Kat, how are you
Andy.
doing today?
Yeah, good, Andy. How are you? How
Oh, I
exciting
am
is this?
outstanding. Yeah, this is exciting. This is our inaugural show. I can't speak today, so this should be fun.
Brilliant. Welcome, everybody. It's lovely to meet you.
And so, what I'd like to do for this show is I'd like to introduce Kat and interview Kat on kind of her background and how she got active uh, as an evidential medium. I first met Kat, geez, like 4 years ago, when my grief journey had almost just began, and I was looking really to learn and to seek connection. And Kat, through a number of readings and workshops and things that we've done together, I've learned quite a bit, and it changed my grief journey completely. So today's show, I would love Kat to ask you some questions and kind of learn a lot more about you and your background and kind of what brought you into, you know, your journey.
Absolutely. Go for it.
Well, I mean, obviously, the first question is, can you share your journey and how you became an evidential medium?
Yeah, I didn't actually go looking to become an evidential medium, Andy. I was working as a head of buying in the UK fashion industry. I'm very happy in my career and very happy in life, oblivious to all spiritual pathways. I wasn't religious. I'd kind of grown up in the first 11 years of my life in a Church of England school. So I had been placed into a local school that had a religious emphasis, but at the age of 11, parted and not parted ways with religion or church, but I just didn't have any involvement with it from that point onwards, and I went my own way. And nowadays, I'm very much spiritual in a broader sense that I love all religions and faiths and dabble in all of them, but don't really subscribe to one or any in particular. I go wherever spirit direct me in order to learn and kind of grow and expand like all of us. So I would class myself as non-religious, but I mediumistically, I had had some exposure to mediums, which probably actually saved my life. My sister actually lost a child in early stages of pregnancy before she went on to have two beautiful daughters. And as a result of her grief, directly as a result of her grief, she was in such a bad place 6 months later, still struggling to conceive her first child and in really upset. She was desperately wanting to start a family. That my mum took her to see a medium, not just any medium, it was a very high profile medium. This lady gave a lecture and a talk, and there were several hundred people in the audience, I believe, and out of she only did a couple of connections that night, and actually one of them happened to be for my sister. Now, what my sister brought back to the table was that the information was so unique, it couldn't possibly be anything but true in the respect that she'd just bought a house. In that house, she'd only literally been in it a week, Andy, and they hadn't even wallpapered or decorated the house. And in the kitchen area, there was no tiling behind the sink, and the wallpaper was peeling back. And my sister actually, just before leaving the house, got a bit of sellotape and sellotaped the wallpaper to the wall. And so this lady then said, I know you've purchased a house recently, and just as you're going to have to tile behind the sink because as you left the house this evening, you sellotaped this piece of wallpaper to the wall. Now, it's something that just, it was before social media anyway, but it was something that couldn't be referenced by anybody else. It was something only my sister knew. And I think it really shocked her. But she went on then to talk about my grandfather and how he had actually died and been in a wheelchair before he died. And we didn't actually know that information to be true. We actually thought he had been fully able-bodied. We did know that he'd burnt his legs.
Mm.
He dropped his leg. He used to have this habit of putting his legs above the mantelpiece and leaning back over an open fire, which probably in Scotland, probably not the greatest thing to do, Andy. And then one day
Right.
he just accidentally slipped and he bent his legs, bless him, and it ended up at him in hospital. It was the start, unfortunately, of the sort of end of the journey of his life from that point on. But we didn't know he was in a wheelchair, and this lady expressed it, and we actually found out later that he had been in a wheelchair for the last week of his life. So it's all really interesting information, some of which we knew, some of which we found out afterwards. But it sowed a seed in my mind. And I remember nagging my mum saying, well, I want to go see this woman. Who's this woman? What do you mean? Like, how can this work?
Yeah.
And it wasn't until, my mum was like, no, you're not 18 yet. You haven't you don't need to be exposed to this kind of thing. Your sister was deep in grief. And it really did transform my sister
Mm.
dramatically, Andy. And I find it very interesting now in hindsight, now that I work largely with a large proportion of bereaved parents, looking and seeing that actually, in terms of a soul plan destiny, the first, situation where I'm exposed to a medium is to do with the grief of the loss of a child. And so that was my first inclination. And then I nagged and nagged, and it was around the age of 18 that I finally got to meet one. And my mum took me to a local library where there was three mediums presenting. And actually the energy was so strong and the healing so intense on one side of the theatre that I had to leave the room. I almost vomited. I felt so sensitive to the energy. And the lady next to me was having a problem with her right knee, Andy. And I remember my right knee burning. I turned to the lady, not knowing her, saying, "Excuse me, can I ask you a question? Do you have a problem with your right knee?" And she said, "Yeah, it's in a lot of pain." And I was like,
Mm.
oh, I'm picking up on it. And so I knew there was a level of transference happening in that room. And I went out of the room and I actually came back in after the demonstration had finished. So I didn't see the full demonstration. I saw some colours in front of people, like auras or lights, if you will.
Mm.
And I came to ask the lady what were they and why could I not stay in the room. At which point she agreed to meet with me on another occasion and to do a reading for me. And that reading was so incredible. I was a fashion student at the time. I was dyeing everything acid green, orange, and bright yellow. Everything that I owned was getting
Sure.
dyed. And
Sure.
I wasn't wearing any of these colours, but I just bought three new dyes thinking I need to finish dyeing those things. And I put them in my pocket. And she said, the first thing she said to me is, I want to talk to you about three colours. I want to talk to you about acid green, yellow, and orange and why you're being so attracted to those colours. And
Wow.
I was like, oh, and I literally took out of my pocket the three dyes and I
Yeah.
laid them on the table in front of her. And I was like, oh, like, how could you possibly know this? So I think I was very fortunate, Andy, that I was exposed to incredibly gifted people, if you will, that had developed their skill to a level of competence that was very evidential. And the reading that she went on then to deliver changed my life. I didn't really have any other exposure that I can recall. Again, in terms of mediums, I had a curiosity. I'd watched a few mediums on TV, like John Edwards and people like
Hmm.
that, but I hadn't really delved into it anything beyond that. And so I had a curiosity, but I hadn't really, I don't know what to say. I was sensitive and open to it. And then I have a diving accident and everything changes. So I thought I was open, I thought I believed, but then when it started happening to me, I was fearful initially, and then I realized that I didn't believe at all because that level of trust wasn't there.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I had to teach myself, really. There was nobody around me that was spiritual or could guide me in the physical at that point. I had to sort of feel my way. And that's really what the spirit world did say to me when they opened up. They actually showed me a moth, a real
Mm.
physical moth, a large one, flew into the bathroom window. And as it went towards the light, a lady in spirit said to me, all you need to do is feel your way to the light.
Mm.
And so that's what I started to do. And when I realized, we see a lot of things on TV, don't we? We see films and media. And so, you know, the difficult or challenging sort of paranormal activity cell films, and I would
Yeah.
imagine, and so we've got this connotation of fear to do with spirit, and that's something that I really want to take away, because my own experience of it is only a loving source of pure unconditional love. And once I realized that what was communicating with me and trying to express itself through me was pure unconditional love,
Yeah.
suddenly I relaxed, I lost my fear, and I started to enjoy these experiences and get curious about them. And for
Yeah.
me, it was kind of that thing of, gosh, we're a human having we're a spirit having a human experience, but we don't really even understand the full potential of the human body or being, that we've got so much more untapped potential, and we can have phenomenal experiences, but we haven't expanded ourselves to look at the breadth of what we're able to achieve. And
Right.
so I actually went to a medium to learn how to close down when I started to open up to spirit. I was frightened. And then once I closed it down and I'd stopped it, I was like, oh, what was that? I'm curious about it. And then I started educating.
I want it back. I want it back.
I was like, hang on a minute, what was that? Maybe I dismissed it a little bit too
Yeah.
quickly.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I wanted to toe the line. Society says it's not the done
Yeah.
thing. So I
Yeah.
tried to lock it down, as I think many people do. We don't talk about it very often, do we?
Right.
And then realized that I could go to Hogwarts. I could go to this amazing school. I could
Yeah.
learn people who were having like-minded experiences, and I could
Yeah.
explore it. And I kept it very, very private for many, many
Yeah.
years, Andy. I did this in the background of my life while I was living a very normal life. And a very normal career, and I just didn't talk about it to anybody. It was
Mhm.
just something privately that I did myself. But the more that I explored, the more excited I got, the more I realized that we're limiting ourselves, we're
Yeah.
limiting our level of communication, that these inspired connections we want to talk about that can completely transform your life. So yeah, so I didn't come to mediumship through a knowing or a intuition or anything like that, or because I wanted to necessarily even be a medium. I was inspired by
Yeah.
a diving accident, and actually
Yeah.
having experiences, I started to become aware of a force that was far greater than myself. And I almost had, I don't want to say it like godlike experiences, but I had an awareness of something of a higher power talking and communicating to me, and
Yeah.
what it said was very beautiful. And when I followed the information that it gave me, it evidentially checked out, and it inspired me to make different choices about life. And as I made those different choices and got braver about learning to trust, I started to live a happier, more fulfilled life, more comfortable, easier in many ways. That's not to say that I haven't had pain and haven't suffering or challenges. Of course, I do.
Yeah.
But what I feel is that I don't feel like I'm alone on the hurdles, and I get some guidance or support that helps me somehow manage through. Does that make
Yeah.
sense?
No, it does. You know what's funny is I didn't know about your diving accident before you just mentioned. I heard something, right? Little bits. But when you and I were working together in one of our workshops, talk about an inspired connection. One of the things that I saw when we were working was being in the water, could see, I don't know, I just had the vague sense of maybe there was land close by. I didn't really know. I totally disregarded it. I had no idea what it was. But once you mentioned the diving accident, in the back of my head, yeah, that's what you were seeing.
Yeah,
So,
absolutely. Well,
yeah,
I'd been a lifeguard, you see, and
yeah,
I worked for on a beach, and I knew that the danger. We used to lose somebody every year to a dog would go into the water, and the people would go
mm,
into it, and the waves would crash against the sort of shoreline wall, if you will, and the rocks nearby would actually, sadly, the current of the waves would knock the people against the rocks and they would die. So actually, I was quite far from the mainland when I actually had the accident. I was out at sea at open water, but I was near a rocky area. So for me, it was quite dangerous, because I got the intuition that if I inflated the BCD, I was going to go straight into the rocks. And I was very
yeah,
paranoid about that. So
Yeah.
the issue was that I suffered overexertion because I was treading water with tanks on my back.
Yeah.
And so it was interesting. But in the moment that I thought I was going to die, I sort of say this for all the listeners out there because it might help them. I'd always been scared of dying and I felt nothing but peace. I had this
Yeah.
moment where I thought, okay, this is it. And I actually said, thank you. I've had a
Yeah.
really nice life. And then I got
Yeah.
a little bit sort of annoyed that actually I'd really like to stay because I really wanted to get married.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's
And your
taken
mission isn't over yet.
it's taken 8 to 9 years to ask me to get married. Really going to take me? Really going to take me this moment? I was a bit disgruntled, Andy. I was like, no. So I fought a little bit harder,
Yeah.
and then weirdly enough, even though I say I'm not religious, because I'd had this schooling from Church of England, I actually said the Lord's Prayer. I felt it's almost like what I saw was almost like, like a wave of energy that you get when steam comes up from a kettle. There felt like there
Yeah.
was a wave of energy that moved towards me. I couldn't see
Hmm.
anybody in the water, but I felt as if I was surrounded by people, and yet I couldn't see anything. I knew I wasn't alone.
Yeah.
And as this wave came for me, I thought, this is it. I'm dying. But the atmosphere changed. I felt extreme peace, very, very calm, was not panicked at all. I was
Yeah.
very accepting and I wouldn't say excited about it, but I was almost sort of prepared or ready or kind of not fighting against the wave, if you were.
Yeah.
But then something told me to say the Lord's Prayer and just say thank you. And so I did. I said the Lord's Prayer and said thank you. And then I saw this wave of energy pull back. And I knew that regardless whatever happened next, I was going to survive.
Yeah.
And that was really a turning point for me. It's also sort of an example that I see throughout my life of the power of prayer, of actually sometimes having faith in oneself or faith in something higher suddenly transforms your perspective of something, or gives you the power to not control the situation, but even maybe just let go of a situation
Right.
and not panic. And maybe in that moment, that's what saved my life as well, because I wasn't expelling as much energy as I had been in the moments running up to that. And
Yeah.
so it kind of, it was a turning point, a pivot.
Yeah. It's interesting because I mean, I think it's through those very traumatic things that we go through, right? You know, almost dying, losing a loved one, anything that's like earth shattering.
Grief.
I think it does give you an opportunity to connect
Oh, I think it gave
to,
me I
yeah,
think it gave me an opportunity to reassess my life, Andy. I think I'd
yeah,
been going very fast paced at work, had probably not been paying attention to my health, or I've been running so fast and sort of burning the candle at both ends, if you will. That suddenly it stopped me in my tracks and made me have to reevaluate all areas of my life, not just my sort of thoughts around spirituality or beliefs. And it's funny because I wouldn't, if I could go back in time, I wouldn't change a thing because my life is actually happier and healthier as a result of that diving accident.
yeah, that's beautiful.
I am happy with the life path that incident took me on, if you will. It it made me make life choices that I'm kind of proud of or happy with.
It's wonderful. So you had this diving accident. It changed kind of your worldview, made you question things. When did you realize that, okay, I have abilities, gifts, I can help people? When did that happen?
Oh,
And go ahead.
not for a long time, Andy.
Oh,
It's
interesting. Okay.
interesting. I First of all, it's interesting the word gift as well, because at the beginning I almost felt like it was the complete opposite of a gift. I felt like but also I believe that we're all intuitive and we've all got this innate part within ourselves, and some people are born with it and some people develop it. So I think I have gratitude that I had a life without this connection in some way. Maybe I did have it intuitively. I had some moments in my adolescence that I can certainly say I had some very strange, what I call coincidences or knowings. But when I sort of played with it for a long time. I just had
Mm-hmm.
fun with it. I just
Mm-hmm.
explored it. I didn't actually set the intent of doing anything with it. other than just getting curious about it.
Hmm.
And it wasn't until, oh gosh, maybe 15 years later, a teacher of mine said, well, you can sit here and do workshops for as long as you like, but if you're not going to do anything with it, what's the point,
Yeah.
And asked me to go do a demonstration in a town 2 hours away from London called Felixstowe, for a little centre that he purchased or had an investment in. And I agreed to go. And it was the first time I'd ever done a platform mediumship demonstration. I had done many one-to-one readings. I had played with it within sessions, but I'd never actually stood up in front of strangers and, sort of demonstrated what I could do with this.
Right,
And
right,
I was really, really nervous, Andy. But this really lovely gentleman, I'm still friends with today, Fred. He he was working at this centre, and he had heard that a medium was coming from London. It'd been sent by somebody that was quite well known, and he got out all the like royal china, just really made a fuss of me, and kind of was, it felt quite special. It was, I'm laughing, I'm from Yorkshire, so I was like, a mug of cup of tea, a cup of char in a mug is fine for me. I'm a real northern girl. But
right,
he'd gone out and got the royal china, and like he served this beautiful tea service, and he sort of looked after me in the initial stages when I was feeling quite nervous. I don't know if he knew that I was inexperienced. He was just excited that somebody new was coming to his centre, and so he sat down. And there was two, as you are in a church, there's sort of like pews to one side, pews to another, and he sat down at the top of the aisle, and I was kind of curious about him. I was like, that guy is sat right at the top of the aisle. He's moved his chair to the top of the aisle. Why would he do that and block the sort of health and safety walkways? Why
right.
would he do that? And I was curious, and I was staring at him. And here's a way that spirit will help you. Before I'd taken a wrong turn, I was going to go take my daughter to um, a location, and it was closed, and so we ended up at Sutton Hoe, which in outside of Felixstowe is one of the sites where the Viking boat was. I think the film The Dig actually shows you the excavation of this site, but it's where a big Viking ship was found.
Oh,
And
wow.
there was a National Trust exhibition, and I took my daughter in there because she was quite young, and she pointed out on one of the shields or on one of the exhibition photographs actually this sword with a snake. She really made an emphasis of it, and I sort of smiled because the snake looked like the Kundalini snake, and I was like, oh, bless her, she's already getting at the sword of spirit and this Kundalini snake. And when I looked at this gentleman, suddenly this image from this visit flashed into my mind, and I said, "Oh, now I can see, sir, that you're very tattooed. I can see that you've got tattoos up your arms, but I'm being told that you worked for that you were in the Royal Navy." And I think I maybe even mentioned that he'd been a chef in the Royal Navy, and we talked about his life in the Navy. And I said, "Oh, I know that when you were once in Hong Kong, you you were with a friend, and your best friend's in spirit, and the friend that was with you at that tattoo parlor is in spirit, and he's here with me today, and he's saying that he got had two girls' names on his arm, and he fell out of love with them." And so he
Wow.
had to think of a way to hide the girls' names, and he went to the tattoo parlor to put the sword and the snake that would hide those girls' names. And so we
Yeah.
got a lovely reading, very nervous, sweat was pouring off me. And I was just relieved, Andy, when he said yes. It was just like, oh my God,
Yeah.
amazing.
Yeah.
But his partner at the time, a lady called Joan, had sat in a different area of the centre. And because largely she told me quite strategically that if she'd sat next to her partner, I potentially wouldn't have read for him. Um, and so she sat in a different area, and I read for her. And as I was leaving that day, she said to me, "Why is it that mediums never bring through children?" And I said, "What do you mean?" She said, "Well, you did a really lovely reading from my partner, Fred, who was the first person that you connected with tonight. But he's got three children in spirit, under the age of 5, and nobody ever seems to bring them through. I
Mm.
believe only on one occasion had somebody actually connected with the children, but she was saying that um, he was very traumatized because one of the children in particular just was not coming through. And he had a lot of guilt and concern about that, largely because he'd been serving in the Navy and couldn't get home for the death of of one of his children. So this really sort of traumatized me, Andy. I left that centre almost like the adrenaline of the high of getting on the stand, then the relief of actually delivering a message. Then I had some funny moments. I had some really funny moments. There was a lady that was deaf in the audience, and I went to give her a reading, and she kept going, "No, no, no." So I thought she was saying no to the information. This is where the public are kind of fun with you. But she was saying, "No, I can't hear you. Just come
Oh,
to sit in the ambience. Don't come to me because I can't respond. I can't answer."
wow.
So that was quite funny. But I'd had this high, I'd had this nervousness, then I'd
Yeah.
had this challenge, if you will, and then I left there feeling totally upset with myself, actually, that
Yeah.
I perhaps hadn't done my best or delivered the greatest need, and I was really kind of worried about it all the way home in
Yeah.
this 2 hour car journey in the evening, and something said to my soul, contact that centre and ask to see that gentleman. And I was finishing my full time work in the fashion industry on the following Monday, which was the 22nd of May.
Mm.
And I said, I can't come back to Felixstowe, it's 2 hours away, but I can meet you halfway in Braintree in Essex. And there's a lovely little centre there. And if you wanted to meet me, I'll be at the Costa Coffee at 11 o'clock. But if you're not there, then my husband will kill you because I go shopping and I'll just spend all the money. But if you're there and I can try to connect with these children, I'd love the opportunity to try to bring them through for you because no parent should have to wait. What I was told was 40 years for a connection with your children. I can't promise you anything, but I will try. And on the way there that day, I called the secretary. I left a message. I then left a message. They then I got a message back saying that they would be there. So I drove to the centre that day and shopping centre and bless him, he got all dressed up, Andy, beautiful bouquet of flowers, came to deliver these flowers for me. And what transpired was amazing because my granddad said, I've got the bairns, he's in spirit. Ben's been the Yorkshire for child, and I'm going to help you. Don't panic. And so I sat down and I tried to use my sense of humour a little bit as well. He he was dressed so smartly and beautifully, and I felt such a pressure to deliver. But I
Yeah.
said, look, I've got a boy coming in. And he says his name's Mark, and he says the word green bank to me, or he shows me a green bank. Does that mean something to you? And he said he died at Greenbank Hospital. Well, that
Oh,
was a game changer. I was like, oh my gosh, right, okay, all
yeah.
right. And I said, and then I got another piece of information. I was like, I started to sort of chuckle. I said, now I know you've got loads of tattoos because we've talked about your tattoos before, but you don't look like the kind of guy to have two butterfly tattoos. And I've been told that you have one on each leg, one for each of your twins in spirit, which I believe are girls. Is that correct? And he started to cry and he pulled up the leg of his trouser and he revealed a butterfly on each calf. At which point I started to sort of like this.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
this crazy story. So it was his reading that really changed my life. And I suddenly realized I need to take this a bit more seriously. I was then even more profoundly impacted when Spirit said, put the 22nd of May into the internet and put Arthur Conan Doyle's name in. Arthur Conan Doyle I trained at his centres. I actually trained at 33 Belgravia Square, which was formerly his house. He's the writer of Sherlock Holmes, but he's also the greatest writer about spirituality in the 19th centuries. He'd lost a child, and 22nd of May was his birthday. And so it suddenly had another level of significance to me. Also, then, if you look at soul planning and you play with spirits, little signs and synchronicities, I lived with a doctor at university. I lived with several doctors, one of which is a Dr. H. Watson, and the sidekick to Sherlock Holmes and his sign spotting, Dr. H. Watson. So it makes me giggle when we're here today to talk about signs and synchronicities and inspired connections, because these things have been ever present in my life and what have guided me to feel a bit reassured that I'm on the right path.
Yeah.
So I don't know if that helps, but that was the pivotal moment where suddenly I'd gone from playing with something to
Yeah.
realizing that it had a serious healing purpose and that it could change. It was really his feedback and his reaction and his relief, to know that his children were okay, that made me realize, okay, this is it. I've got to take this more seriously and I've got to do what they're asking me to do, even though it it's not that it didn't feel right to me, Andy. I felt a calling and a pull that I couldn't explain,
Sure.
but it sort of was unconventional when you looked at my corporate career and the amount of work that had gone into it, to throw all of that away, not
Right.
knowing whether this was the right path or not, or was ever going to become anything. It was,
Right.
I walked away from a six-digit salary and a really good corporate career,
Yeah.
literally on the request of spirit saying, please leave your job. We need you to do something else.
Yeah.
And I
Yeah.
had no job to go to. I was like, what
Yeah.
job? Where? Well, just do what we tell you to do when we tell you to do it. And it was very humbling, Andy. I'd gone from corporate boardrooms to reading for people in village halls for £10 to go,
Sure.
thinking, what am I doing?
Yeah.
What am I doing? But trusting on another level, well, if they say this is what I've got to do, I've just got to do it, because
Yeah.
clearly there's a plan. I don't know what it is. I don't know what it looks
Yeah.
like. I don't know how it's going to go, but I'm just going to do it. And so the first 3 to 6 months were really hard, but I just stuck. At no point did I feel like I was going to go under. I just kept doing what they instructed me to do. And then one day, in November, they said, okay, contact this guy. Um, have a conversation with him. That guy turned out to be Mark Island, and the rest of the story is it changed my life forever. And I'm
Yeah.
still thankful to Mark. He's taken me. He's a good friend. He's a good mentor. We have a good giggle together. I'm ever so grateful to him that he did change my
Yeah.
life, and he became.
Yeah.
I got a really great friend as a result of it.
Yeah.
So I appreciate it,
Yeah.
and
Well, I'm going to say it personally. I am really glad that you dropped that corporate job and, you're doing what Spirit has asked you to do, because, you changed my grief journey substantially. I know there's lots of men in that I know that you've worked with, that you've helped tremendously. I mean, it's really hard to put into words when you are at your lowest, right? You've lost a loved one, your entire worldview is shattered, expectations of, everything are gone. And you're not even at zero, you're less than zero. Before you and I started working together, I was a complete skeptic. I had really no interaction with mediums. Didn't really even understand it much. Like I'm sure some of our listeners and watchers, maybe they don't know either. But that's where I was. And I mean, the sessions that we had, it changed everything, right? It went from a an unbearable pain to an unbearable pain, but with a lot of hope, right? And that inspired connection that you and I worked on for, I don't know, maybe a year. We worked quite a lot. Um, it enabled me to be able to help other dads and other people that are in deep grief. And it was because you chose probably the not smart choice of leaving a six-figure income to just kind of just doing, what Spirit said. That's like I said in the beginning, that I'm really glad you did, and it had such positive ripple effects that are beyond, you and your everyday work. You've helped a lot of people, and those people are helping lots of people as well. So
it's kind
thank
of
you.
it's kind of a nice lead on to sort of say, what are inspired connections? Because it might be worth to sort of share, because although I'm a medium, we're actually here to sort of delve into sort of the bigger feeling of actually what is connection and how can you get it in your everyday life, and how can inspired connections in whatever form that they come change your life. So if I was to say to you and throw it back to you a little bit, Andy, and say, what does an inspired connection look like to you? What was it in that connection that kind of inspired you or gave you hope? What was the game changer? What was it that was that pivotal moment for you?
That my son is with me, and is with me every single day. Specifically, the one of the instances, and it was just one of them. Uh, I asked you during one of our sessions, Josh and I used to say hello to each other in a very specific way. And you paused for a moment and then you turned bright red and you said, "He's flipping me the bird. He's giving the F finger," right?
Finger.
And that's exactly how we would walk by each other, because he worked for me, and in our office, he would walk by my desk and he would flip me off and I would flip him off. That was never on Facebook. That was only something he and I would do. It's not something that I talked about. And you showed me that, or Josh showed you and you showed me. That instantly changed my view of the finality of what I understood to be death to, no, he's here. And then there was countless other episodes uh, where you didn't know what I was doing. He knew what I was doing, and he was telling you what I was doing. So for me, and I'm still a little skeptical, but for me, it's a very real thing. Yes, my son did pass, but he's sitting right next to me and he inspires me uh, personally through things that he tells me, right? Because I've connected more in your workshops. I've learned how to listen, kind of like you did early on. I'm still very, very much a baby when it comes to that, but I've learned to listen. And uh, like we talk about signs, and you mentioned really early on in my grief journey, you mentioned a phrase, you said, "Oh, look at all those feathers." That's all you said, and you moved on, and we didn't talk about it again. I didn't know what you were talking about. It was kind of, for me, it was like, well, that was weird. From that day on, there was a feather in my path every day for 2 years, and it was a gift from Josh. It never happened just like, oh, there's a feather. It was, I was always thinking about him. I was always wondering what was going on, the typical questions people ask. And every time I did that, there was a feather in my path. And when I say in my path, I don't mean close to me. I mean, I'm walking and it's right in front of me. That happened for 2 years. That happened in every climb and place. I could be, on the beach or on the ski slopes or whatever, and I would always find a feather. And it was almost every day for 2 years.
Oh,
And you talk about a sign. That sign means nothing to anybody else, right? Oh, you found a feather. That's great. But you told me in your own way, or spirit, feathers. That's going to be one of the ways he will send you a sign. And to this very day, when I really am in a bad place and I really need to see him or hear from him, I'll find a feather.
that's amazing.
So,
I
yeah.
should share with everybody at this point, actually, I should say that I'd had no intention of, I lived my life by these inspired connections. I had no desire to do a podcast show, no desire to be on YouTube. If you looked on my social media pages, you'd laugh. I'm hardly out there. I work largely on word of mouth and just referrals. And so, I'm a bit shy. I'm loud and lively, but I'm a bit shy and I don't put myself out there. And and maybe Josh and some of the kids in the spirit world were pushing me, but I I had a really inspired connection, and maybe by sharing this with the viewers, and it'd be a nice way to sort of end the session today, is to explain to them actually how these things can move from validations to a much broader experience. So I have a friend called Irene. She is the vice president of one of the biggest support groups in USA for bereaved parents. She was I was going to Paris for my mum's mother-in-law's 80th birthday. She'd just recently been bereaved. She'd lost her husband, so this was quite a big deal. So we were wanting to cheer her up. Paris had been something that she'd always wanted to do. It was her 80th birthday, so milestones that we're talking about, and we're here starting this milestone journey partly for you as well in terms of Josh and his 5-year anniversary. But it was a milestone. It was her 80th birthday, and we're on the train. And I don't often get a chance to look at other people's social media. I'm usually so busy, but this day was quite exciting. I was able to skim through my phone, and ironically, the only and the first post that I saw was actually Irene's, and it was her landing at Paris airport. I was like, oh, like, she lives in South Carolina. The chances of her coming to Paris the same day that I am on the Eurostar was just bizarre to me. But it gets even more fascinating, Andy. I'd actually booked into one hotel, but I normally, having been in the fashion industry and stayed in Paris quite frequently, I like to stay in the Marais. And if anybody is French and listening, they know that that's the artist quarter, and it's a really lovely bohemian place to stay. It was somewhere that I really love. But I thought maybe it was a little bit remote for somebody who's 80 to get around the centre of Paris potentially. Not that my mother-in-law has any issues with mobility. She's very fast on her feet and very with it. Doesn't look her age at all. But it was a consideration, and I also was, an opportunity came up to upgrade into a hotel that was 4-star with a pool and everything in the centre at a cheaper price to the hotel that I'd booked. So I changed hotels. I changed hotels to an area that I'd never stayed in before. And so I text Irene, and I say to Irene, where are you? Where are you staying in Paris? And she says, La Opera. And I'm like, no way. I'm in La Opera. Oh my God. Well, I have to come down and meet each other for a drink. So you see, these inspired connections, they don't just connect you with your loved ones across the veil, they connect you with the living. I think that's
Yeah.
really important, that they connect you with things that can benefit your everyday life. And it was really lovely to see her. We met for a drink and we were chatting away and catching up. And as I left there, I got a ping from, the reason that we're sat here tonight is I got a ping from a girl called Carly asking me if I'd consider doing a podcast or YouTube show. And what was ironic is, although Carly's, it's not an unpopular name, but it's not that popular. I actually only know 3 Carlys throughout my 50-year in in life here on Earth. Her Irene's daughter in spirit is Carly, and so it caught my attention because I was like, it was the timing of it. I was like, oh, it's from a girl called Carly, but I was on holiday, so I said, I'll get back to you. Anyway, as I got to Eurostar on the way home, Spirit said to me, hey, you didn't really pay attention to that text that you got. You need to reread it. And so I did. And then I was like, oh, okay. And so I contacted Irene and said, should I have a conversation with this girl? What do you think? It sounds like it's your Carly trying to make contact. I don't want to ignore her or kind of put her off. So I agreed to meet with this young lady, who then put us in touch with the software that we're using today for this podcast, and did some interviews with us. She was actually in the early stages of her own grief journey, and therefore not in a place to take forward the project at this sort of stage as it would occur as we started to work through things. But she was the person that influenced me to take this leap of faith into doing a podcast or a YouTube show. But where you come in, which is really interesting, is on the pivotal day when she's having a little bit of a grief crash and sort of sharing that she might have to sort of quit everything and quit a job, quit her life as she knows it in the UK, and actually go on a little bit of self-exploration or soul journey to do some travelling or kind of explore other options in her life and to kind of pull her life together in a different way, take a break, really.
Mhm. Yeah.
Um, you actually sent a link to me on a podcast interview that you'd been given. And what was really funny is that I didn't know, but my brother-in-law's mum, who died of stomach cancer, and Carly, Irene's daughter, died of stomach cancer. And the Carly who's contacted me asking me if I want to do this podcast, her mum's died of stomach cancer. So there was this cancer connection. And
Yeah.
I knew it was to do with cancer and milestones because it'd been the 80th birthday, it'd been the anniversary. Carly in spirit had put a number plate in front of me and it said 1010. And I thought you meant 10 out of 10. And I said to Irene, why is Carly sending me this sign on 1010? She said, well, actually, that's her birthday. And then Carly living was like, oh, that was the day connected to my loved one who passed to spirit. And I was like, their angel anniversary. And I was like, oh, like, that's kind of crazy, isn't it?
Yeah.
And so I then go, the conversations flow, you get introduced to the mix, and I think, like sadly, Andy's recovering from cancer and he's good, he's in remission, but as a
Yeah.
result of perhaps losing a child and going through that stress, it had an impact on your body, it affected your physical health, and
I
it
think
came out.
so.
And then Spirit did a lovely sort of divine, inspired connection that helped you get to the hospital in time to get treated and to get
Yeah.
into remission, which is kind of amazing, which we'll talk about in your interview, if we
All right.
may.
Sounds.
But so we see again how maybe an inspired connection saved your life. In this respect, it got me on the radar. Oh, the cancer connection, the milestone connection. We've just been 5 years in spirit. It's Andy that's supposed to be on this podcast. As you sent me this amazing interview, and I was like, God, Andy's actually a really good public speaker. You came across so well. I was like, wow. And Carly and I living looked at each other and she was like, that's the guy that's supposed to do the podcast with you. And I was like, yeah, that's what I think. Are you happy to let go? Are you happy? And of course, she's willing to drop in and out, and we will be hearing from Carly at times. So we've got a lovely interview ahead with her, but she's going to go and take a break and go travelling, and here we are. So I can't think of a better pairing, actually, Andy. But it's funny, isn't it, how it started with I had no inclination of doing any of
Yeah.
this, but the
Yeah.
inspired inspiration, it gets even more magical. When I went to do the marketing campaign, and I should say this really clearly, I started building up what would a logo look like, what would the words look like, and I developed a logo. And Irene had said to me that Carly was into scarves, so I drew something that looked almost like a scarf or a tie with a heart in it, with two connections and a little sparkle, like divine inspiration. And I sent it to Irene, at which point she was like, oh! And I was like, are you okay? She's like, oh my gosh, Kat, oh my gosh, I've got to get something. And Carly, her daughter, used to sign every
Wow.
note that she left for her mum, and she used to leave notes frequently with the exact logo that I'd drawn.
Yeah.
And we actually laid over, she had a thank you note, and I said, oh no, I've written a thank you thing for people that come on the podcast. Let me
Yeah.
show you it. And we actually overlaid the note that Carly had done on top of the logo and the thank you, and it was the same writing, Andy. It was the same writing. It fitted almost like a template.
Yeah.
And Irene was like, how can this happen? I said, it's only happened to me on a couple of occasions. There is a boy in spirit called Nick, who I really do believe is inspiring and sat there with Josh and Carly in the spirit world. But he had made me do this for his mum's birthday, or his angel anniversary. He'd asked me to draw a postcard with hearts and logos and things all over it. And I sort of said to him, well, this doesn't feel like your style. You're normally so regimented and clean cut, and you'd want a picture of waves and like this is kind of girly stuff, and it doesn't feel like you. And he's like, no, it can't be any of it. It has to be this. You
Yeah.
have to stick with what I'm telling you to do. So I had
Yeah.
done it for his mum and sent her this postcard on his angel anniversary. And when his mum received it, she was like, oh! And I was like, are you okay? She was like, oh my gosh, Kat, I write a letter to him every angel anniversary that I don't know if he ever sees. And the drawing that you've drawn is the drawing that I've drawn on the last letter that I wrote. And she showed it to me. And so we see these divine connections. So
Yeah.
they are the inspirers. They are our ancestors, our loved ones. Their job is to keep the living alive and to help us have a more comfortable life. When we I don't want to say the word invoke them because that sounds as if they shouldn't be here, but when we spend time with spirit, loving them and cherishing them and letting them be part of our life, we realize that we can maintain the relationship. Yes, it's not the hug that we get in the physical world, but we can have this beautiful experience of continuation. And so ending doesn't feel so permanent.
Yeah.
It gives us a little bit of an opening or air. Do you agree?
Oh, yeah. And I think that the relationship has all of the potential to not only continue, but to be even more powerful than when they're physically right next to us.
Yeah, it's more it's special, isn't it? It's quite awe-inspiring.
Yeah, but you're absolutely right. From my personal experience, you do have to relax into that, right? It
Yeah.
is,
Yeah, you
I
can't
think
do
it
it
is,
blindsided. I wouldn't have
no,
left a six-digit salary had I not spirit
no,
let me win or learn with small things that had
yeah,
no real severe consequence. I agree that you can't
yeah,
just, got to be careful with the life choices that you make and
sure.
sensible with them, don't you? Your life choices are your life choices. But what I would say is that both of us are finding that as we're growing in these inspirations and
Hmm.
getting a little bit more confident in them,
Right.
we're able to take bigger jumps, aren't we, or bigger
Yeah,
leaps into these sort of, you know, sort of rising to the challenge, if you will. So here we are.
yeah,
We've got a
yeah,
podcast show, never dreamed of
yeah,
having.
yeah,
Be live on social media, God help us.
yeah. And
And
just
God help, and
imagine where it's going to go. I
I know,
mean, you
I
made a
know, I know.
decision all those years ago that affected all these people in a wonderful way. Who knows what
Yeah.
this?
But then you've got to laugh as well. You've got to kind of say, does the public really know what they've let themselves in for? Because good speakers, Andy. We'll be here all day. But anyway, with
Oh,
that, I'm going to say it's been lovely to be interviewed by you today. We're going to roll reverse now. I'm going to interview you.
all right.
Thank you. It's a
Thank
joy to
you.
be here with you today, and I'm excited about doing these sessions and future
I
sessions
love it.
with other guests and finding
Yeah.
out where it goes and what we discover about inspired connections.
Yeah. So, for our listeners and our watchers, be sure to tune in next time when you get to hear me tell my story. And
Absolutely. And
and we'll see where that one
oh,
goes.
brilliant. Love it. Sending you much love. Lovely to meet you, everybody. Take care. Bye bye.
Be
Bye for
well,
now.
be blessed.
Be well.